Hey, everyone. Welcome to Storytelling Time, the place where every story comes alive. If you love getting lost in thrilling tales, gripping mysteries, and epic adventures, you're in the right spot. I'm your storyteller, and here, we don't just tell stories, we bring them to life. Whether it's fantasy, mystery, horror, or even a bit of comedy, we're all about immersion. So grab a snack, get comfy, and prepare for a journey that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single chapter. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the Storytelling Time family. Let's dive into the stories that await, starting now. The familiar scent of decay and something acrid, like burnt sugar, clawed at the back of Jackie's throat the moment Perry nudged the front door open. It groaned in protest, a drawn-out sigh of neglect that mirrored the state of the house itself. Driftwood siding, bleached gray and scarred black, looked as though a vengeful sea had finally retreated, leaving its battered spoils behind. Jackie swore she could taste the phantom char of pine, a bitter tang that had no right to be more real than the dust motes dancing in the weak sunlight slanting through the doorway. It's wild how the past stays with you like that, she thought, her chest tightening. Sometimes, those spectral tendrils felt more substantial than the very hand she now pressed against her sternum, trying to quell the tremor that had taken root there. Jesus, she breathed, the word catching in her throat. It feels like just yesterday. Perry's arm snaked around her shoulders, pulling her into a solid embrace. His strength, as always, was a tangible thing, anchoring her to the present like a sturdy hawser against a restless tide. The house hasn't changed much, he said, his voice a low rumble against her ear, a comforting constant. But we have. His certainty pricked at her fragile composure. Have I really? The question echoed in the hollow spaces within her. Between them, Perry was the mountain range, unyielding, stoic, a silent guardian against the storms. And Jackie? She was the wind, a restless spirit prone to sudden squalls and unpredictable shifts. Over the years, Perry had learned to weather even her most violent hurricanes. Being his older sister, by a mere 4 minutes, had always felt like a cosmic joke. She'd yearned to be his protector, the one to shield him from harm. Yet, it was so often the other way around. A bitter smile flickered in the darkness that still resided within her, the demon of her addiction acknowledging Perry's unwavering presence, especially now, after 730 days of sobriety. 730 days. An invisible tightrope she walked daily, each step a conscious act of defiance against the craving that still whispered in the shadows. She knew, though it remained unspoken, that Perry's constant vigilance, his insistence on this pilgrimage to the ruins of their childhood, stemmed from a deep-seated fear of leaving her untethered. Their sibling bond was forged in the crucible of shared loss, an ironclad pact born from the ashes of their parents. The fire. Her mother's carelessly discarded cigarette at 2 a.m, a detail forever etched in Jackie's mind, a cruel, arbitrary end that had irrevocably altered their lives. After that, all they had was each other. But let's be brutally honest, Jackie thought, they were also a mess, tangled in a codependency as thick and suffocating as the dust in this house. What sane siblings mutually decided to revisit the epicenter of Jackie's near-fatal alcoholism on the very anniversary of her sobriety? The dilapidated front door shrieked as Perry gently pushed it further inward. The rusted hinges looked ready to surrender at any moment. After you, he murmured, squinting against the sudden burst of weak sunlight. Even amidst the decay, Perry retained a quiet gentility. As he held the door ajar, the shallow scar on his right cheek, a pale line against his skin, snagged Jackie's attention like a malevolent hook. Some days, that mark was a gaping chasm, threatening to swallow her whole. Other days, she silently begged any deity who might be listening to just let her drown in the guilt it represented, to finally succumb to the weight of her actions. That mark had become a permanent fixture on Perry's face on the day Jackie's drinking had nearly ended everything, exactly 730 days ago. The day Perry's voice had ripped through the car's interior, raw with terror, "Jackie. Stop the fucking car." But her bloodstream had been a toxic cocktail of Bacardi Limon, deafening her to his pleas. The next thing she remembered was the sickening crunch of metal wrapping around unforgiving bark. She could have died that day. But the memory that still jolted her awake in the dead of night was the horrifying realization that she had almost killed Perry. A lot could happen in 730 days. But self-forgiveness, Jackie knew with a cold certainty, wasn't one of them. "Well? You coming in?" Perry's voice, laced with a gentle concern, pulled her back from the precipice of memory. Jackie shook her head slightly, trying to dislodge the clinging tendrils of the past. She met Perry's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them, a language they had honed over years of shared trauma and unspoken burdens. She exhaled, a shaky breath that did little to ease the tension in her chest, and stepped across the threshold. "Watch your step," she warned, her forehead furrowed with a familiar anxiety. The thought of the rickety floorboards giving way, plunging them into the darkness of what had once been their father's man cave, sent a fresh wave of unease through her. That's where he'd been that night, passed out amidst the overflowing ashtrays and half-empty bottles. "Kids, stay here. Do not move," their mother's voice, sharp with fear, echoed in Jackie's mind. The image of her mother's soot-streaked face, the frantic grip on their small arms, was vivid even after 2 decades. "I'm getting your father." Perry and Jackie had clung to each other, small and terrified, the inferno's heat radiating like the breath of a volcano. They had never seen their parents again. 2 decades later, here they were, 2 damaged survivors navigating the skeletal remains of their home. Midday sun struggled to penetrate the grime-coated windows, casting the interior in a ghostly, pale blue light. Jackie's shoulders were hunched, her senses on high alert, as if they were trespassers in a haunted house of their own making. She coughed into her forearm, the air thick with an ocean of dust, each particle a tiny ghost of what once was. As she cleared her lungs, Perry's voice, tinged with an unexpected wonder, drifted from behind her. "Jax, look at this. The fireplace. Unbelievable." "It's still here," Jackie whispered, a sudden lump forming in her throat, sharp and painful. It was as if a benevolent hand had momentarily brushed away the decay, a fleeting glimpse of the living room as it once was. Like those haunting underwater shots of the Titanic, juxtaposed with the grandeur of its maiden voyage. They moved towards the fireplace, its brickwork blackened but intact, and sank down cross-legged on the dusty floor. "This was our favorite spot, remember?" Jackie avoided his gaze, the memories flooding in, a chaotic torrent threatening to overwhelm her. "Yeah," Perry murmured, his voice softening with a palpable nostalgia. For a fleeting moment, the imagined warmth of the hearth, the ghost of crispy, fire-roasted marshmallows, momentarily eclipsed the pervasive stench of mildew and rot. "Remember our Esmores nights?" Jackie asked, the question barely above a whisper. "Duh. What about all our fireplace movie nights?" Perry launched into a surprisingly accurate, nasally imitation of her childhood voice. "But Mom, I want to watch Beauty and the Beast. Perry always gets to pick the movie." Jackie punched him playfully on the arm. "First of all, I never sounded like that. And second. So what? I knew what I wanted." The corners of Perry's mouth lifted, a genuine sparkle in his eyes, as if an invisible cloud of confetti perpetually followed him. "You really did, kiddo." A sudden weight settled in Jackie's chest, heavy and constricting. How could Perry still look at her with such affection after everything? After the wreckage of her life, the ruined relationships, the lost jobs, and yes, the collateral damage to his own life. How could he still choose her, when she had so often chosen the numbing oblivion of a 40 of Jack Daniels over him? How could Perry still love her after she had almost fucking killed him? Perry's gaze widened, a sudden brightness replacing the nostalgic softness. Hey! Remember when Mom would bring out those hot drinks she always made? He paused, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. Apple, something? Apple SSH. Apple Schnapple. Jackie snapped her fingers, the memory surprisingly vivid. Yes. I mean, looking back, it was basically just hot apple cider, but damn it was good. And it truly was, a small beacon of warmth and comfort in their often turbulent childhood. Their laughter, thin and slightly hollow, echoed through the abandoned asylum they had once called home. Perry leaned back, supporting himself on his hands, his gaze drifting upwards towards the mantel. I loved our fireplace hangs. Especially our movie nights down here. But nothing beats our movies up in the projector room. Jackie tilted her head, a flicker of confusion. We never had a projector room. Perry waved a dismissive hand. Sure we did, Jax. Remember? Up on the 3rd floor. Dad converted that old storage space. No, Perry, Jackie insisted, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. I would remember us having a projector room. Our movie nights together were our favorite thing. You just said it yourself. The house seemed to hold its breath, the silence amplifying the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Perry leaned in slightly, his expression now oddly intent. Memories are quite something, aren't they? A subtle change in his tone sent a shiver crawling down Jackie's spine. Perry was often wistful, but this felt different, almost clinical. We often remember things in ways that are easier for us to digest. A prickle of agitation made Jackie fidget. Geez, Perry. You sound like Dr. Lasco. A small smile touched Perry's lips, as if he appreciated the dark humor. Dr. Lasco. Her therapist since the accident, the man who was tirelessly trying to excavate the buried truths from the wreckage of her mind. He certainly wouldn't have sanctioned this self-inflicted exposure therapy. Perry seemed to shake off his momentary impersonation, his expression returning to its usual gentle warmth. As Jackie watched his amicable face scan the empty space above the fireplace, a sickening unease coiled in her gut. Imagine you had actually fucking killed him. Man, I can still picture all our family photos up there. Perry's voice, laced with a childlike wonder, twisted the knife of Jackie's guilt. Her face flushed, a wave of heat rising from her chest. The familiar sting of tears pricked at her eyelids. How pathetic and infuriating was it that even after everything, she still felt a pang of, what? Self-pity. Hey. Perry reached out, his hand covering hers. Oh, Perry, Jackie choked out, the carefully constructed dam of her composure finally breaking. She lurched forward, throwing herself into his arms. I'm so sorry. Her brother held her with a familiar tenderness, a care she felt she no longer deserved. Jax, it's okay. I'm still here. We're both still here. As her chin rested on Perry's shoulder, her gaze drifted across the remains of the living room. Something felt off. Beyond the pervasive sense of decay, something in the layout, in the very fabric of the space, felt wrong. Her brow furrowed. Wasn't the doorway to the kitchen on the other side of the living room? She felt Perry shrug almost imperceptibly against her. I don't think so. Jackie stared at the place where she remembered the kitchen doorway, a blank stretch of faded wallpaper now, as if trying to physically pull a lost recollection into focus. And then, she saw them. Faint, translucent figures in the space where the kitchen should have been. Her mother, a ghostly silhouette, moving with a restless energy as she prepared their apple schnappels. Her father, slumped motionless at the table, his face pressed against the dark wood. His spectral glass was empty, the phantom bottle of Jim Beam beside it equally so. Her mother floated into the living room, 2 steaming mugs in her hands, a faint wisp of a cigarette trailing from her lips. "Kids, your father's not feeling well. Let's have our apple schnappels in here." "Oh God." The faint, purplish bruise on her mother's translucent cheek. Perry's voice, quiet and heavy, jarred Jackie back to the present, a gut punch of recognition. "You're remembering the truth about Mom and Dad, aren't you?" Jackie pushed herself away from him, a sudden coldness gripping her. "How did you?" Perry looked down, his finger tracing a line in the dust on the floor. "We always put them on a pedestal after they died." A shiver, sharp and unsettling, ran down Jackie's spine. "What are you talking about?" As Perry continued to speak, his voice took on an even more detached quality. "Do you remember that first drink Dad ever gave you?" Jackie's eyes darted around the decaying room, her jugular throbbing in her neck. Try as she might to deny it, the memory surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. Her father's slurred encouragement echoed in her mind. "Come on, Jackie. Just one drink. It'll be our special time, just you and me." The bitter taste of that first sip of beer, the way it had made her young body recoil, was overshadowed by the desperate, childish yearning for her father's affection, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he did love her after all. It had been a tidal wave, the overwhelming pull of the full moon swallowing her whole. She had been so small, so vulnerable. And her mother? Her mother had turned a blind eye, just as she had to so many other things. For so long, Jackie had used the tragedy of their parents' death as the convenient scapegoat for her alcoholism. Admitting that they had, in their own flawed ways, helped to cultivate the monster she had become was like twisting a knife in a wound that never truly healed. And the bitter knowledge that she had been too weak to break free on her own only made the blade turn deeper. The room swam around her, the air suddenly thick and suffocating, the heat on her face reminiscent of that terrible night. Or was that just the phantom warmth of the childhood fireplace? The comforting memories of those Esmores nights flickered through her mind, frame by fragile frame, until they dissolved into nothingness. Jackie doubled over, a wave of nausea rising in her throat. "We never had a fireplace." Perry's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. Her fingernails dug into her thighs. She looked back at the wall where the comforting hearth had been, and it was gone. Only a blank expanse of faded, forest green wallpaper remained. Their house had been ravaged by fire, yes, but that was it. There had never been a happy childhood gathered around a crackling fireplace. Ever. Her hands were suddenly cold and clammy. She stumbled backward, leaning against the cold, damp wall. "Perry. Where are we?" He stood up, his movements fluid and strangely detached, and glided towards the skeletal remains of the staircase. One hand rested on the decaying banister, his footsteps creaking with an unnerving rhythm as he ascended to the second floor. "Perry." Jackie's voice was a dry rasp. He stopped at the top of the stairs and turned, his face shadowed. "Come to the projector room, Jackie. We love watching movies together, don't we? There's a movie I'd like to show you." As her brother disappeared from sight, a cold dread coiled in Jackie's stomach. She did the only thing her fear-addled mind could conjure, the instinctual, ill-advised move straight out of a classic horror film. She went upstairs. The air on the second floor was heavier, thick with the undisturbed dust of years. Each creak of the floorboards beneath Jackie's hesitant steps echoed in the oppressive silence, amplifying the frantic thrumming of her own heart. The hallway stretched before her, a gauntlet lined with empty picture frames clinging precariously to the oxblood wallpaper. They were gaping voids, like missing teeth in a decaying smile, each one a silent testament to vanished memories. At the far end of the hall, a doorway glowed with an ethereal light. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic flicker, beckoning and ominous at the same time. Through the opening, Jackie could see motes of dust dancing in a distinct, cone-shaped beam. The telltale whirring and clicking of a film reel unwinding was the only sound that cut through the suffocating quiet of this house that was rapidly becoming alien. Half of Perry's face, the side bearing the pale scar, was bathed in the projector's light, starkly illuminated against the surrounding gloom. It gave him an unsettling, theatrical air, like a figure emerging from the shadows of a forgotten stage. "I think you're ready to see how this movie ends, Jackie," he said, his voice level, devoid of the usual warmth. "This is the most progress you've made since we've been coming here." Jackie's thumbs dug into the soft flesh of her palms, a desperate attempt to ground herself in the present. "Perry, you're freaking the fuck out of me." A tremor ran through her legs, threatening to buckle her knees. Then, Perry's illuminated face flickered, a sudden burst of static snow momentarily obscuring his features before settling back into a disturbingly blank gaze. He simply stood there, framed in the doorway, before disappearing completely into the light-filled room. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need to understand this unsettling shift in her brother, Jackie followed, her movements propelled by a fragile thread of adrenaline. She reached the doorway, her hand gripping the warped frame for support, and her mouth fell open. Perry was gone. The room, though small, felt vast and empty without him. A single, vintage film projector sat on a rickety table in the center, its lens casting a brilliant beam onto the far wall. The whirring of the reel was now louder, more insistent. Frantically, Jackie's gaze darted around the room, searching for any sign of her brother. She shielded her eyes with the back of her hand against the harsh glare of the projector's light. And then, from directly behind her, she heard 5 words that plunged her blood into icy stillness: "Jackie. Stop the fucking car." Her body seized, a violent tremor that left her paradoxically paralyzed. Moving with the agonizing slowness of cold molasses, she rotated on the spot, her gaze drawn inexorably towards the far wall, towards her worst nightmare brought to life on flickering 35mm film. On the makeshift screen, projected onto the peeling wallpaper, was a horrifyingly familiar scene. It was Perry and her in her beat-up Honda Civic, the interior bathed in the sickly yellow glow of streetlights. Exactly 730 days ago. The day she had almost. Oh my God. Her head pounded, each throb a fresh wave of fragmented memories surging to the surface. The disjointed images, the muffled sounds, the overwhelming sense of recklessness, they began to coalesce, forming a brutal, undeniable reality. The cloying sweetness of cheap lime-flavored alcohol on her breath. Perry's increasingly frantic pleas from the passenger seat. Her own defiant laughter, slurred and dismissive. The blur of the road rushing past. The sudden, terrifying shriek of tires. The sickening crunch of metal. Perry's scream, abruptly cut short. Her joints ached with a phantom pain, her stomach churning with a bile that tasted of guilt and regret. Clamping a hand over her mouth to stifle a rising sob, she stumbled backward, out of the projector room and into the hallway, which now seemed to be contorting around her. The empty picture frames were no longer static. They were being sucked into the walls, disappearing with a soft, unsettling whoosh. The floorboards beneath her feet buckled and cracked, rising into distorted peaks and valleys. Wooden beams swung down from the ceiling like menacing pendulums, coated in a thick layer of dust that now filled the air, choking her. She tried to spit out the chalky grit of disintegrating drywall, the hallway transforming into a swirling blizzard of white powder. Panting heavily, her lungs burning, Jackie stopped dead in her tracks before a stained glass window at the end of the hall. The colored panes, depicting a distorted pastoral scene she didn't recognize, seemed to writhe and shift. A bone-deep dread, chillingly familiar, washed over her. Each time she faced this, whatever this horrifying experience was, she wondered if this fall would be the one to finally shatter her completely. Maybe it'd be better if it did. Holding her breath, a strange sense of resignation settling over her, Jackie threw herself forward, her hands clawing at the air as if grasping for a lifeline that wasn't there. The sensation of falling, of plummeting 2 stories, stretched into an eternity as the memory of her childhood home twisted and dissolved around her. Then, the jarring impact. The sudden rush of icy air against her skin. Jackie gasped, her eyes snapping open. The sterile chill of a hospital room assaulted her senses. She sat bolt upright, ripping the sticky suction cups from her face and chest, the thin gown clinging to her sweat-soaked skin. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled the stark white space, a relentless metronome counting out a reality far removed from the crumbling house. Dr. Lasko, his familiar, weary face etched with concern, sat across the room, rubbing his forehead with a tired sigh. He, too, was tethered to a tangle of wires and suction cups. The harsh fluorescent overhead lighting seemed to amplify the lines of fatigue around his eyes. Ever since her hospitalization and subsequent incarceration, Dr. Lasko had been guiding her through these simulated memories, forcing her to confront the buried trauma, the excruciating truths she had so desperately tried to outrun. And in these simulations, Dr. Lasko had become Perry, the brother she had loved, the brother she had killed 730 days ago. Disoriented, Jackie blinked rapidly, the visceral reality of the memory still clinging to her like a shroud, contrasting sharply with the mundane geometry of the ceiling tiles above. "I don't ever want to do that again." The words were venomous, raw with terror and a profound sense of violation. "Jackie, Dr. Lasko began, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't start," she snapped, raising 4 fingers in the air for sarcastic air quotes. "Jackie, don't give up. This was the closest you've ever come to facing the truth." As the initial surge of adrenaline and cortisol began to recede, leaving her drained and trembling, Jackie fell back against the pillows. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks, leaving wet tracks on her clammy skin. Removing his own sensors with a practiced ease, Dr. Lasko rose and approached her bedside, pulling up a chair. He moved with a quiet respect for her fragile state. "Jackie, I understand how incredibly challenging this is for you, but you did an incredible job today. If we continue to make progress like this, there's a real possibility you'll gain your freedom sooner." Jackie looked at the well-meaning doctor, but all she could see was Perry. Multicolored confetti, a whimsical image from a happier time, seemed to drift softly around his phantom form. His face was the sun, his eyes reflecting a world she had shattered. "Perry." With a weak, trembling grip, she reached out and took Dr. Lasko's hand. Her vocal cords felt like sandpaper. "I'll leave this place one day, document." A single tear escaped her eye and traced a lonely path down her cheek, soaking into the collar of her gown. "But I'm not sure if I'll ever be free." Dr. Lasko didn't respond verbally, but she felt the subtle pressure of his hand squeezing hers, a silent acknowledgement of the profound truth in her words. Jackie licked her dry, cracked lips, a phantom taste of oaky bourbon momentarily flickering on her tongue. Exhaustion pulled at her, a heavy undertow. She let her eyes drift shut, welcoming the oblivion. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that tomorrow, Dr. Lasko would guide her back into the labyrinth of her memories. And no matter how masochistic it felt, no matter how much it tore her apart, she vowed to keep showing up for the simulations. Because even if she could never forgive herself for what she had done, at least in those fractured, simulated realities, she got to see Perry.